All right. Hello and welcome to the Coach's Corner, brought to you by the Endurance Lab, where the coaches from the lab recap the week and answer your questions from the forum. My name's Jason Flores, one of the Endurance Lab coaches, and today I'm joined by Coach Taya Friestedt up there in the corner. That's this way. Andrea Cullen right next to her there. And we got Mitch there in the middle, and I've got a special guest, a white dot. That's actually Coach Ian Murray. He's probably trying to get connected there, and I'm here on the bottom. So welcome and good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Hello.
Yeah, there's everybody, getting everybody's live video all sorted out. We are doing this live, so just bear with us here as we get everyone dialed in. We're going to get this shared out, but we'll get started on some topics today. We've got some viewers here as well. So if you guys on the live stream come up with any questions today, definitely drop them in the chat there on the side. I will bring them in live, and we'll have the coaches answer those questions live as well. So it could be about training, racing, in real life, on Zwift, virtually, whatever you guys come up with, we're more than happy to chat about today. I'm going to get this shared out today, and we'll get started with our topics here. And let's see, we'll get started with that, and I can get to talking. So we're going to start really quickly with some just hot topics in the lab, stuff that we've heard about here on the interwebs or on the forum. And one thing that's kind of in the news these days, or just kind of questions in writer's mind, there was a really good article from Velo News and the Velo News podcast about chain line and kind of how it affects kind of our use on the bike. And I thought it would be a good idea to bring it to the roundtable to see if the coaches had any ideas as far as how it differs from indoors and outdoors, and just kind of their overall views. So maybe I'll just pass it over. I'll just start here with Mr. Michigan there right above me, Coach Mitch Dangramon, kind of your experience with Chainline and how it works out. And then I will kind of bring in some of the tips and tech from the Velo News podcast.
So I've got zero experience, and you would have thought I would have I'm real big into research. You would have thought I would have seen this and dove into it, but I've got no idea what Chainline is. So actually, but I had a rider this week. I think it was Chris O'Hearn say, "Oh no, he had Chainline," or I think that's what he was saying. So I'm actually ready to learn here.
Sure. All right. So what we'll start with is exactly, people ask, what is chainline? And kind of where it is on the bike. So essentially, chainline is defined as where the chain sits from the center of the bottom bracket in relation to the frame, and then how that is related to your cassette. And so people talk about cross chaining, talking about putting things in bad positions for the chain where they could put strain on the chain essentially. So for bike manufacturers, essentially the point that it starts with is the center of the bottom bracket. And essentially, if you have two gears in your chain in your front gears, it's in the middle of the two. Or if you're a single geared, it's right on that line. And so how that relates to the bike, and then how that translates to different things as power output or that sort of thing across the cassette in the back. So we've all heard the notion of, we shouldn't cross chain, or we shouldn't go from like the biggest gear on the front on our chain ring to like the biggest gear in the back on our cassette. We've all done it at some point, and kind of how it's affect. And so now that we have a definition down, we'll pass up to the corner there to Taya. Have you used this? Do you pay attention to this at all, kind of out on your rides? Hold on. 1 second.
I'm here. No, I'm here. That's user error here. I really don't. So I had never thought about it, paid attention to it until this came up on our discussions this week. But I knew about the cross chain just because, well, I guess especially when you're new, you have the bike and you just hear the weird noise of cross chain and you say something's wrong with my bike. But Mitch, I have no experience with it in terms of detailing information.
Yeah. So one of the things, or what comes up in these conversations again, is kind of you feel like there would be if an efficiency loss essentially, where you're not getting all the power that you should out of each stroke, because of the efficiency between the front chain ring and the back cassette. And with that, what you want to try to do is try to make that line as straight as possible. So like in the World Triathlon, choosing that right gear, you may hear somebody choose a larger chain ring or a smaller chain ring depending on the terrain, so that they can keep that chain line straight as possible. And so the numbers that they're kind of looking at are anywhere in the single digit. I'm not trying to propose that this is something that we should all look at, but it is something that we kind of deal with, especially in the virtual world, because we are on smart trainers, and those riders that do ride ERG, making sure that that line is a much more straight could help with the wear and tear of the whole component system. With Andrea there in the corner, she may have a couple comments as far as from the triathlon world, if in fact, but let's see if she has any experience from it or if it's all new for her as well.
No, I'm learning here. Like I would be aware that you shouldn't cross your chain, but we can't really see what's happening when we're on the bike, and perhaps that's why we don't have awareness. And even when it comes to gearing, I'm like, well, is it harder or easier? That's the way my mind works. So I suppose from my perspective, I think the easiest we can make it for other people to understand actually what to do, probably the better. And I think when you're new in cycling or triathlon, getting thrown really complicated things to do, we're afraid to ask. Well, I think we've all admitted here, what is this?
Exactly. No.
I think the simpler we can make it, and sometimes even in all of our own realms of work, we can tend to get a little bit technical because then we sound smart, but then we can lose people. So yeah, so that's my in on it.
So I thought that in the triathlon community, you only use the big ring anyway in the front.
Yeah, don't you just ride the same pace the whole time?
But the other thing too, I will say, Andrea, is some of the newer computers, like in some of the newer technology. So like my ETAP setup on my bike, through the Wahoo Bolt, actually I can get a data field that will show me my gearing, and it'll actually track, which is actually sort of neat to look back. Sometimes you can go back and you can actually look at your gearing through the ride, and it will show you, and it'll tell you what gear you're in the most, and it will tell you, big chain ring, small, and then what gear in the back as well, which is pretty neat to look at sometimes.
So if you really wanted a data crunch, then you can look at your power and your torque efficiency and
I guess so, yeah.
That's where it would come in. And so there's actually even gone as further on the Shimano side of things with Di2. What you can actually do is you can make it so you only shift from the right side. So as you go down or up in gears, it will change your front chain ring to get the most efficiency out of the chain line. That way, as you come down, let's say you're getting into the bigger gears, you're heading into the 28 or the 32, it will actually bring you back down to smaller gears in the cassette as it changes the front chain ring down to the smaller chain ring, just so that that line stays straight. So nuts and bolts of it, as you get down to the numbers, like I said, it's in the single-digit percent as far as your wattage and effectiveness. You're probably going to get more out of doing things like waxing your chain or just cleaning, lubing your chain, that sort of thing. But that could be a whole conversation of how we clean our chains and what we put on them. So we could leave that for another conversation.
And one thing I learned is that you're supposed to replace your chain periodically. That's the best way to preserve your cassette. So having that little tool that measures the distance, between the teeth of your chain is something pretty simple that you can do at home and replace that very often.
Yeah, and you could easily do it with a straight edge for the short term. There's a park tool that's amazing that you just click on and you drop into the chain. So those are very, very useful. And changing components together, it's like changing chains twice, changing the cassette and the chain rings is kind of the adage that people go by, because you want to make sure that you've got fresh components both ways. Or if you're like really into the 1%, you've got your training chain and then you've got your race chain.
Oh.
So you're talking about Justin Wagner?
Yeah. You know, riders like that have got completely brand new chains, completely waxed, boom, put on for the day of the race, snapped on, you're good to go.
Now, let's be honest, a clean chain, very clean chain and lubed, everything's perfectly right, makes a difference. It does. It does. That could be 10 watts right there. I'm not kidding.
Yeah. Don't be that.
And losing a couple pounds could help me too. So.
Don't be that.
Last time.
Go ahead, Andrea.
last time we were in Kona, so it would have been
Mm-hmm.
2 years ago. The ceramic speed gearing was being talked about, and your 1 watt. And like Mitch said, I'd always be thinking, well, there's that 1 kilo. Is this sort of on the same sort of thread of conversation? And does it make a difference?
Yeah.
Yeah. It does beg the question too, if that does make a difference, and you know, between ceramic pieces, waxing chains, and all of that sort of thing, it asks the question. But people like to have that under them. We'll come back to it. I just got a message from Ian. He's getting suited up and coming, and he'll be joining us in just a little bit. So we can move on with our conversation. I guess with that, let's move on to a conversation that we've had in the forum, a little bit about age group and kind of age group. I don't know, what do you want to call? We were using the word cheating, but there's probably some other creative words that we could use for
cheating. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, it's just like, you know, we want to talk about, and I'm not going to bring politics in, but we like to say in politics these days, oh, well, people are less than truthful, or they're you know, no, they're lying. So let's just call it what it is. There's an, I don't know if it's an epidemic, but there's certainly a really prevalent amount of cheating that seems to go on. And maybe it's because of social media that we hear about it. And it's probably because of the websites that I frequent. But there's been numerous cases of cheating in the amateur ranks in the last number of years. There was just one in the last week, a triathlete in Canada. She cut the bike course and she cut the run course.
Oh.
Wow.
There was Julie Miller a couple years ago in Canada, who actually I think had qualified for Kona and was like world championship qualifying for her age group. She was cutting the course. There's been estimates that 10% of Cat 1, 2, and 3 cyclists are doping in the amateur ranks.
Oh, that's, yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, we have that here too.
We've got hidden motors now. There was a French amateur cyclist caught last fall using a motor in a race. You've got your local Strava cheats that we all know about. So what's amazing is this is actually spawning sites such as there's a guy named website called Marathon Investigator, and he's working with like sports stats, and it's just his like side job. He's working with like the guys who do the timing and then the photo companies from the races, and he's able to piece together whether people actually cross timing mats and looking at their, you know, and like that's how the woman in Canada last week was caught, was he put together all the circumstances of the race and where she passed certain timing mats, and she had lost her timing chip, right? So, you know, we have USADA, they're testing amateur cyclists now. But what's funny is as I dug into this, it's really nothing new. So on Google, like popped a 1971 article from the New York Times talking about the prevalence of cheating in sports. So this has kind of always been there. So it's not necessarily new, but maybe it's just changed in how it's being done. But I guess a question I had, and I asked my wife this last night, asked my daughter, I was trying to like, why do people feel the need to cheat in amateur sports? And is it, I mean, I'd be interested, I guess, in your guys' take on it before we dive into some of the stuff I found.
Yeah, I think it's odd. It takes a different kind of person, especially there. You know, we can bring up, I don't know if you have it there on your notes there, but we could bring this up in the virtual world, which it's a lot easier to kind of hide behind a keyboard or hide behind, you know, your avatar, and we could talk about that separately. But it does take, you know, a special person to really dig and do that sort of thing. But let's hear what the other coaches have to say too.
I do think it's, I have to think it's the person, it's personality. And I have to think that that person would cheat not just in sports, but in other things. I don't think somebody is, you know, honest and truthful in everything they do, and then they decide that just for bike racing they're going to cheat. It's got to be the person.
Yeah, I'd be on the same page with you, and maybe I've had a really naive view on it because I just can't understand how someone could do it, and I really didn't see it in most of the top athletes that I've worked with. For me personally, I even feel like drafting and swimming, I want to do the hard race myself. I'm even finding it hard to pick up on drafting. But I was speaking to a top athlete on the ITU circuit last week, and I felt that I brought a negative slant to the conversation when I said, well, we really have to do so much these days because there's people out there cheating. Yeah. And he kind of looked at me, and he's competing at this level, and it was almost news to him. So it actually was really refreshing to see that there are really good athletes out there that still believe and are working really hard. And I almost thought, God, I've just opened his eyes to something, when I thought his eyes would have been opened and I was the one that was being naive. So I think we need to be really careful how we talk about it. And I think online people are very fast to make claims about what other people are doing, and I see how that affects people that I know personally that are very good at sport. Have you heard about the system they've set up in Switzerland where you can register yourself and have yourself tested? It was off the back of an article that I sent to someone, and they came back to me and went, I think it's called Clean Sport or something.
Okay.
But you pay and have yourself, it's like you create your own passport for sport to prove that you're clean. And it's really terrible that the cost is falling on the clean athletes everywhere. They're having to buy the Informed Sport or NSF certified products, which are more expensive, and then to prove the fact that you're doing it clean. But perhaps it's worth it because there's so many cynics out there now. But it's not. I think it's only about $100 or $200 to have yourself tested and registered on this. And it seems that this is an organization independent of everywhere else, and perhaps they're the only ones that are going to go and do it, a private organization, because it seems that all of the governing bodies, they don't seem to really care. I don't. Maybe it's too expensive. I don't know.
Yeah, it's almost like to me the drug use is almost easier to explain than like the cutting the course, because we talk like first you start like drinking beet shots and having extra caffeine, or maybe some Sudafed, or using your daughter's inhaler, and then and then it snowballs from there to where I haven't Googled this, but because I'm afraid to go there, but apparently if you wanted to order EPO from Russia, it's pretty damn easy as long as you're comfortable putting your credit card into a Russian website, which I don't know who would.
They already have your number anyway.
Yeah, I know. But the course cutting is what I don't get, and some of the stuff that I read was part of it's the culture that we built around sport, that we train like the pros, we try to follow nutrition plans like the pros, we have bikes as good as the pros, and so we get to where we're training and racing like the pros and we want to emulate them, and then that desire to win becomes so big that you might be willing to bend the rules to achieve that. Go ahead.
How deluded do you need to be to think that doing a 19K, 21K is that you race the race? It's there has to be a part of the brain that's just not right.
Well, Andrea, but there's no difference between people getting on Strava with their KOMs and averaging 282 or 258 for a mile for 6 miles. Yeah. And then trying to claim that as their pace.
So,
amazing.
The biggest thing that I found was that it comes down to, there's research in sports psychology that a lot of people judge their competence relative to other people rather than yourself. So you end up with a lower level of morality and a higher likelihood to cheat. So basically their self-esteem is too intertwined with the sport, and everything about that person becomes the sport. And that's kind of what leads to, look, I've kind of built that I'm doing this Ironman and I'm going to Kona qualify and I'm really awesome. And then they're willing to cheat to achieve that because their whole self-esteem is built up around that event.
Well, and there's also the other part where people get so invested in posting everything on social media. Yeah, and social media only shows the good. Mm-hmm. And so they can't show anything bad, because no one gets up there and no one posts on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram and says, man, what a crappy day, I just got destroyed. It just doesn't happen, really.
So we should all try to do that next week. We should all have an endurance lab post where we just completely fail at what we were doing.
Right. Yeah. Think of when people cook. They always put like this really great picture of the amazing meal they did, but no one puts up this giant piece of crap they said, oh, it didn't work out today.
This is true.
So I think that's the other thing that I thought was exactly what Ian was saying. It's all about social media, and Strava's social media. Facebook. All those things. We're all celebrating our successes. We're never like posting our kid do crappy at a piano recital, just like Ian's saying. So it's all about me too. It's about the medals.
And it's widely frowned upon for someone to put up a picture of their kid and someone to comment on it going, wow, your kid looks pretty ugly and it's pretty stupid. So bad call.
I'm so glad he enjoyed
Yeah,
it.
I'm so glad he's here.
Well, how about
seriously? Think about it. I mean,
how about
go ahead.
go ahead.
No,
I was
go
going to
ahead.
say, how about the people who are cheating and don't know that they're cheating? I'll give you an example.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So one of my neighbors here, she is selling this product, which is supposed to make everyone's lives better. And it has to do with, it's a topical cream or a gel, and essentially it's human growth hormone.
Yeah. It rhymes with schmh, GH,
and it's apparently great for the skin, and I don't know, maybe your wrinkles disappear, maybe you sleep better, and other things happen, and your marriage is better all of a sudden. Whatever those things that come with the use of the gel. But what if you are in sport and now you have this, and it's also it's a substance that's prohibited, and all of a sudden you're doping?
Well, it's the same thing with older men going to their doctor because they're feeling slower and tired and don't recover as fast, and they have low testosterone. And there's numerous discussions out there in the triathlon community about the exemption, use exemption forms, and actually submitting it and playing by the rules. But that there's a gazillion 40 to 60-year-old men who have testosterone supplements that are racing and not reporting it. It's the same thing. It's cheating.
Oh yeah.
I don't think there's any excuse for it. We have the WADA list. The onus is on the athlete. I think when athletes are able to give companies or doctors or the supplement, if we ever let them be able to blame, people are going to use it as the excuse and start doing it more. So I think it should be a really harsh rule. Once you're caught, once you're out, no matter what, permanently.
Yeah. It doesn't matter where you're finishing in the race either. Because you're still, if you're a back of the pack racer and you're coming ahead of somebody, you're still cheating. It doesn't matter if it has an impact on the podium or not. Mm-hmm. It's still dishonest.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm quite passionate about it. And I know a lot of scientists now will say, well, we should just let performance enhancing drugs be used. But in my mind, what about our kids?
Exactly.
When do they start? When they're 10? Right. We've just set a message that, and every medicine and every drug has a cost in your body. Mm-hmm. And you may not care, but it just, I don't know. I think we need to stay strict on it and just somehow try.
Yeah. And I agree. And having the background in law that I do, I think it should be just like any other law that says you can't just claim that you didn't know that you couldn't do it, right? You can't go out and rob somebody or kill somebody and say, oh, oops, sorry, I really didn't mean to. So
yeah, I think even on a couple podcasts I was listening to, they were saying, oh, there should be a different like a separate category in triathlon for run what you brung. Like there's no rules. They can just come and you race. But I think
that's called a Spartan race.
Oh, there we go. For our fellow Spartan podcasters out there, yeah, we all lost all those viewers now, Mitch. But I guess kind of bridging that.
So we have no people who like kids and no Spartan podcasters.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess crossing that gap to what kind of person does it take to do that kind of cheating? I guess a little bit of the conversation goes to what a lot of us spend a lot of our time with. We do a lot of training in the sphere of like Zwift or a virtual world. Some of us do some racing on there as well. We've seen a lot of it go down. A lot of the conversations go down kind of in public about cheating in that world. Obviously, it's really easy to do things like, change your weight or, miscalibrated equipment and that sort of thing. But I guess that would put all those riders in this same realm, right?
Yeah,
for sure.
I think it's even more ridiculous if you're cheating at a virtual cycling thing.
Yeah, I think so too.
It just says something about your mental state. I mean, if you tie your self-esteem so much into the results or so much into how you perform with your fake friends on a fake race,
for fake points, for fake points,
right? No, I mean, look, I get it. It's competition. It's funny. It's fun. But at a certain point, I mean, you're not getting paid for this. If you're having to go to those lengths to do something that is not your career, come on.
Yeah. Yeah, I have.
It's meant to be fun and training.
It should also make you feel pretty bad about yourself, quite frankly. Yeah, you win a race, you do great, but at what cost? Is it really your performance?
Right.
Yeah, I have worked with athletes in our circles of
I had
Go ahead.
I say I had a person in Santo Domingo who was taking KOMs, running KOMs on their bike, and I flagged him a couple times, and then one time I asked him, hey, I think you got this. I said, I think you got this wrong. This was obviously a bike, not a run. And they didn't. No, it's legit. And so I started posting things like, hey, what event are you going to do in Rio? Because you pretty much have the world record from the 400 on up over a 30-mile run. So I'm really interested to see a Dominican take 8 golds. And I got blocked.
Yeah. Oh man. I have worked with some of our athletes in our realm with just kind of just trying to balance themselves. They were trying to get their setup right. It was so like all over the place, and it was like killing them that they couldn't get numbers to be consistent. Not that they were trying to cheat, but they felt that they were, because they couldn't get their setups sorted out. So kind of oppositely, it can just run yourself mad trying to get things set up too. And really it comes down to, at least in the virtual world, you're trying to try to be as honest as you can. You've got to be honest to yourself. And it could really just, put you in this crazy spiral of like trying to get, this talking to that and making sure that this is the same for outdoors and indoors and all that sort of thing, when in fact, you just want to get on and, get your work in and have a good, honest time out there. But, there is heated discussions. There are face groups that are dedicated
I'm part
to this.
Of ZADA. So, yeah. I spent the last hour at work yesterday going through submissions to ZADA and trying to clear the queue, because we have all these people who want to be certified to show that they're playing honest, which is good.
For those of you who don't know what ZADA is,
let's hear.
It's the Zwift Anti-Doping Association.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So let's tell Andrea a little bit more about it.
We don't pursue cheaters. All we're doing is validating setups to make sure that the outdoor power matches the indoor power. And so we're not pursuing anyone who might be, I'll call it slope doping. Does anyone know what that is? So there's, on a lot of power meters, there's an offset you can change. I just really made a lot of cheaters happy because they can go do this now. But there's ways that you can just, in your power meter setup, you could actually change the amount of power it shows. So it's very easy to cheat. But so no, all the ZADA is focused on is making sure that the equipment is calibrated properly so it matches their outdoor power, so that you can basically, if you have a 400 FTP outdoors, that you have a similar FTP indoors on your trainer is all it's really.
Yeah, so you're verified. You get a little check.
Yeah, you get a little check. So if you go across certain thresholds in the game, you automatically get flagged, and ZADA will look at your performance, or some people can flag you or whatnot. But just a way to try to make the game a little cleaner.
I don't believe this exists because I've never seen that flag.
Do we need to look at you, Ian?
So there was a question here, but I'll bring it back. There's a question from a viewer from Zwift Live. He is named Jakub Powal from Poland. He's a 16-year-old racer and wondering, kind of with the look at like Zwift Academy and kind of in his coming years, he was wondering what the role was that we thought with kind of this whole talk, I guess, watts per kilogram come in mind. And essentially that's what he feels that the Academy and the Zwift Academy is looking at. I was wondering, I guess, to bring to the coaches, do we feel that's the only part of the picture, or is there more that the Academy is looking at, or that anybody would look at, or that we should look at as coaches for, I guess, fitness in a rider?
Oh, there's a lot more to it, and I know Tay has more insight, but I'll tell you that they're going to be looking at a lot of different things. Obviously, your watts per kilo, your ability to sustain, and then when they do the actual racing, they're looking for how do you perform. And it's not just are you a mash hammerhead type person, but can you control yourself? Can you control your ability to, or can you maintain your ability to hold a pace and keep it under your threshold and attack at the right time? So they're looking for a lot of different things. It's not just pure power, because then it's just submit power numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No race. No race is a. No, there's no race that's a drag race that says who had the most wattages at the end of this race.
Right.
Right.
And that and the simple way to look at it is if you look at riders in the World Tour, for example, chances are they all have amazing watts per kilogram, and they probably have very close watts per kilogram, all of them. Some win, some don't. So there's really so much more to cycling. And for Zwift Academy in particular, at least to select the semifinalists, they have a great tool, which is Today's Plan. And Today's Plan provides a lot of data. It provides data on torque. It provides data on how you use your cadence. It provides data on power at different, durations. And it provides time to exhaustion. There's a lot of data they can look at that will make a difference. They would also look at then from that point on, if, they look at the data to at least narrow it down, then they'll be looking at the rider's profile as well, right? Is this person used to riding outdoors? A little bit of personality might come out when, are they loading all the information? Are they following the rules? Are they following the instructions during the academy? And then at the end, towards when they get to narrow people down even more, they'll look at personalities too, because you need to have somebody who's going to get along with the team. And skills in terms of what skills are they looking for that the team needs at this point too, right? Do they need a general category rider? Do they need a climber? Do they need a sprinter? What do they need? So a lot of things come into play for sure.
Absolutely.
I have a question, Thea.
Sure. Go ahead.
So I'm not doing the academy this year, but I did it last year. And when you're given your instructions, there's often, we'll have our work and then your recovery, work, recovery, et cetera, et cetera. And the recovery is quite easy for a reason we understand on a physiological basis. But in a lot of people, their mindset is, I'll show them how hard I can go. So they might not be dropping down to the recovery number. And I would assume that's something that the academy are looking at, or does it matter? The ability, like you said, to follow instruction.
I can only assume, and I have read some posts actually in the Academy Facebook page from people in the Academy, from Leah Thorvaldsen, and she's very active this year in Zwift Academy. Her comment was the coaches will definitely be looking at the rider's ability to follow instructions. So I would think that something like that will fall into that category.
Interesting. Just to bring this back to the... Go ahead.
Real quick, make no mistake. When you're a professional rider, unless you are like the GC established team leader, road captain, you follow instructions.
That's right.
They don't want someone on their team who's not going to go up the road and chase down the brake. They don't want someone on the team who's not going to go back and get bottles, whose ego is going to be too big for that. If you're a 19-year-old rider and you're getting pulled up to the Dimension Data under 23 team, guess what? You're not probably going to be the star. You're probably going to be working for their 22 or 23-year-old GC person or sprinter or whatever they want you to do. And that's just the way it is. So they don't want that.
Yeah. I was saying just to bring this back to the conversation about cheating. There was a question from Lee Gosden about weight and weight doping. Should our weight, like in our game in Zwift, should it include your bike weight or is it just the rider weight?
It would be just the rider weight.
So yeah, that's right, Lee. So just the rider weight, considering all of our bikes on the computer, yes, are
unless
zero.
Lee is racing against me.
Then
if Lee is racing against me, Lee should add his bottle weight, bike weight, kit weight, shoes,
air moisture weight.
Yeah, exactly. It's just 10%.
If there are any other comments about your experiences with age group cheating or just cheating in general, or questions about whether or not something is, give us a ring in the comments here. It sounds like Mitch is well versed in the different types of ways, and we've got lawyers on our team that can help represent you.
And this call is being recorded.
Yeah, it is. So we've just got a couple more minutes with Ian here. I know he's got a topic we were hoping we could touch on, but Ian, thanks for coming in, thanks for calling in, and welcome.
Hey, thanks, Jason. So the topic I want to cover today is about being injured, and that being injured means a lot of different things. So the first thing is when you feel something that's not right. And I'm going to go with personal experience on this one, since I decided last Friday to play soccer, as I mentioned last week. And apparently when you're 41 and haven't actually played soccer in a little while and had just done a workout, you probably shouldn't go out and try and play soccer.
A little while, that's probably what, 10 years, 20?
No, not 20. Not 20, but less than a decade, but closer to a decade than further.
But this century.
Yes. So I actually strained my hip flexor on my right side. And so the first thing is you have to determine whether you're hurt or you're injured. And right away I knew I was injured, because within a short amount of time, it didn't kind of subside. A lot of times you'll get nagging little issues. Maybe it's a sore muscle, and you'll get muscle soreness. You'll get, delayed onset muscle soreness from lifting. You'll get different things that might hurt, like a stiff back, that you can treat and continue to train through. But once you determine you're injured, you have to stop doing what's going to aggravate that injury, or at least minimize it to a certain extent. And then along with that is, I also came across this great revelation yesterday when I decided to do a little strength workout, because I'm not doing as much biking, I'm not running, and my swimming's limited. Let me do a little strength workout just to maintain some of that core strength. Apparently, you use your hip flexor in a lot of different things, like lying back on a bench, flipping up your dumbbells so you can do a chest press, jumping to the pull-up bar, jumping down from the pull-up bar, a lot of different things that you do. So to avoid continuing the injury process or re-aggravating it, understand that if you hurt something like a hamstring or a quad or a shoulder or an elbow or a hip flexor, those muscles have a lot of different applications to movement, not just what you would think like the hamstring for just pulling the leg up. So you have to take into account everything it can be involved in when you do it, so you don't continue to aggravate it. And then the other thing I want to add in here, and before everyone else jumps in, is your body is a liar. It lies to you all of the time, especially when it's hamstrings or shoulder injuries, things like that, where it will feel fine, and you're starting to think you're coming back from your injury. In fact, you may even get a workout or two in, and it feels great because you took it easy. And then your hamstring gets on your shoulder and goes, "Hey, guy, I think we can go do a track workout. I feel really good now. Let's finish this." Or your knee is feeling better and says, "Hey, man, let's do some 55 to 65 RPM high wattage because it would be awesome. And I think I feel really good now." And so you succumb to that stupidity and you re-injure yourself. Okay, so your body's going to lie to you, because what it's telling you is, I feel better, and the endorphins kick in a little bit, but it's not fully there. So you always have to come back in an injury slowly and use a sanity check. So I use my wife to say, "I'm going to go do this," and she yells at me or tells me I'm an idiot and browbeats me into not doing that and doing something easier. When I need that. So use a sanity check on you to say, "Hey, I'm feeling better, but I've done this, this, and this. So should I do this? Or what do you think?" Preferably a coach or a doctor is better, unless you just like to have your wife roll her eyes at you. But those are the things you definitely need to consider when you're trying to come back from an injury and determine what you need to do when you're taking off from your injury.
That's very interesting, Ian, because I would disagree. And I think that there's a book, and its title is The Body Never Lies, or The Body Doesn't Lie. And I think there's another layer where you can delve into with developing a connection with truly listening to what the body is saying. And it's really difficult, because I think we're lying to ourselves left, right, and center about what's actually going on. And for me, my body screams. So like this time, if there's something not right, I'll just get in my head, something's not right, something's not right, something's not right. And then the anxiety with doing the workout, it's not about motivation. I think there's the body will start to speak, and the more we can listen to it, it's really difficult. Like, trusting in ourselves is something that we would have had as a kid, and then it kind of gets shattered apart as we grow up in life, and then trying to connect back into it. But I think when we can really integrate into listening, we become a better athlete, we become more intuitive, we know what the body is saying, and it's trying to manage between the mind, which kind of always wants to be doing and pushing, and I think it's the mind that's telling us, not the knee. But it's really hard. it's really, really hard. And sometimes we need that outside source of validation, which you've done. But I think even further inside of you, you're the true one that actually really knows what's going on. And often we'll go into the medical system and we'll be with the physio and they'll tell us this is going on, or the doctor or somebody else. And a little part of it is going, no, I don't agree, but we'll end up going down this big route of doing all these things that we're told, when that little voice inside was actually going, no, I think you're wrong. I think I need to look here. But we start to feel a little bit crazy. But I think the more we keep trusting in testing that intuition and ability to trust ourselves, I think you become really, really quick at figuring all the little things that we need to do to take care of ourselves and to push ourselves. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and I'll go in
between.
But
my body's a right bastard.
I'll play the third devil's advocate here and go in between the two of you and say, depends on the injury and depends on what's going on. I think I can see how a hamstring injury, for example, because you stretch too much, can be something deceiving, can be something that you might feel good. And especially, we might get on a bike and you start to warm up and you feel a little bit of pain, but then you warm up. And now all of a sudden you got the blood flow, you're not feeling that pain anymore. It's not nagging you. And you're just like, you know what, this is good. I can push. And you can push. And you do during that workout and you go hard. But then afterwards, you're feeling worse than you were at the beginning. So I think that it depends on the injury and depends on what you have going on. I think the types of injuries that are not significant, but they are nagging, are the ones that catch us by surprise because we think we're feeling better and then we're not. So taking it slowly and testing the waters is always a good rule. And that might mean different things for different people, but a coach can always help and give that reality check and say, let's try this to see if it's feeling better, and it's progressive and it's a dose, right? It's measured.
So that's intuition. Is really important. Maybe there's different personalities and different injuries. So the way we have those athletes and they're kind of there's always something and they need to push, or there's other ones that you need to stop because they're going to hurt themselves too much. And I suppose that it's a real alchemy, I think, for you coaches to figure out, well, where do I go with this person, and why in online, like you working with people, the more you can, the more they're going to get back. Whereas just downloading a sheet that tells you all the training instructions and what you should do or how to rehab an injury, it's not going to quite work. It will save you money, but it's not going to be the same as investing in someone who gives a shit, basically.
Yeah, one of our viewers here, Jack Study, talks as an athlete, as a coach, a lot of times we're very hard-headed, and we don't like to rest or take time off because we don't like to work so hard to get yourself back to where you were. And with that issue, like a lot of athletes don't listen to our bodies and end up pushing themselves through with what he's calling it will be all right syndrome. So a lot of times, that Patrick adds that denial mode seems to be the greatest part of this all, where you're kind of pushing yourself because you're denying that you are hurt.
Right. I believe he needs to stop looking at me and reading my thoughts.
Yeah, pretty much.
Maybe the lesson in this is that we all have a gear when we can absolutely murder ourselves, and that's what you want to bring to the race and certain training sessions. But there's other times when you want to dull down that gear and really be listening to yourself. And if you have trust in your body, you can take it beyond because you have learned how to work with it. I suppose it's all about learning, isn't it? About ourselves.
Hey, Andrew, I have to disagree with you. I think the lesson we take away from this is soccer is a completely horrible sport. No one should play it because it just injures you.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we move on here, we've got Stephen Horvat with a question about recovering. He's actually recovering from a blood clot in his leg. And if there was any advice on how much Zwifting that he should do. But I guess before we answer that, just remember that we are not doctors. We may play them in real life, but in fact, any advice that we should give, you should still reach out and talk to your doctor. But we can definitely give you kind of a little bit of our experiences here. So, coaches, how much work should Stephen do as he gets back from recovering from his blood clot?
I mean, that one actually, and I'm not a doctor, and I don't even play one on TV. I'd be finding a good sports physician. And I'd be talking to him about it because that, anytime I hear blood clots in legs and I start thinking strokes, and I'd be really careful myself, and I'd really be deferring to a physician to get an answer to that question. But like I said, one who's got a sports background, though, I think that's always such a big key. Is if you just go to a doctor who doesn't do sport, you get some funky stuff from them. But find a doctor. Like years ago when I was getting into some longer triathlons, I found a doctor who had done triathlons and used him as my sounding board. So find a good sports doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and while I normally disagree completely with anybody who's wearing Michigan gear, I have to agree with them.
Go blue.
Yeah, go State.
Come on, they're playing Notre Dame. I mean, you still have to
that's just look. I can't find a way for both of them to lose, so disavow that game. But no, it is really important, and clots are really nothing to joke about, because even if you're the fittest person in the world, you start getting some blood clots, you can have some extremely negative impacts real quick if you're not paying attention to it. And we're talking everything from just pain all the way to what could be worse is instantaneous death from that clot letting loose. So you really need to pay attention to that. I know a lot of doctors recommend compression. The Normatec Air Relax boots are often used for people in the hospital. But again, I would never recommend for anyone who has a clot to do anything until they've got that sports-specific doctor weighing in on it.
Yeah. So finding the right doctor sounds like the right key. But going to, let's say, considering Steven has gotten the clearance to ride, I would say just getting some movement in and getting back to strength, but starting at a very low intensity. Often we talk about riders coming back from any injury, starting too hard, too fast, and not being honest to themselves. So making sure that you're just getting those checks and working with your health professional to make sure that you can get what you need.
Yeah, maybe looking at your triggers. So what needed to change in diet and lifestyle and stress and the whole care of self. Sometimes these things just happen, but sometimes they happen for a reason, and maybe go there too.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're going to shift gears here. I'm going to toss it over to Atea, and she's got some interesting talks about taking risk, getting kicked, and getting dropped. So Atea, take it away.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a dovetail into what we talked about last week in terms of failure and is it, right? And a little bit of what we've been talking about here too in terms of pushing yourself, taking risks. And when we talked about cheating, the ego part of things. And so it sort of brings it together. So here, the value of taking risks and getting your butt kicked or going and getting dropped. And what I would encourage athletes to do is trying something new from time to time. We might be doing the same things over and over because we like them. We know how to play the game. We know where we can go, where we can push. But why not trying something new? It could be a new ride. It doesn't have to be something fancy. It could be a new event. There's this gravel race that or a big fondo that you've never done before. Try that. So trying something new at least once to challenge yourself so you learn about yourself, but you're also giving yourself the chance to perhaps find something that can motivate you at different times of the year and push yourself harder. Because, we all talk about training. We have training plans. We have those things to keep us motivated. But we might need something that is outside of that, and you put your training to work. So it doesn't have to be anything fancy or glamorous, but new to you, a new challenge, out of the ordinary, out of your comfort zone. This will help you grow as an athlete, in addition to just doing the training and doing harder and harder workouts, if that's a thing. Anyway, you will suck a lot before you don't, and just be okay with that. And when I say, trying something new, you might say to yourself, you know what, I'm not a racer. I love my local rides. I love the group rides that I go to. I just want to keep doing that. Well, try something new there. How about that? If you are always conserving energy, spend more time in the wind, or, try to spice things up, get out of your comfort zone. Or if it's an event that you do, try a longer version of it. A lot of these events, they have 50K, 100K options, right? Go for the longer one this time. Or in a race, try doing a breakaway. Follow an attack. What's the worst that can happen? If you don't take the thing is, if you don't take the risk, you will never know and you won't learn. You will always stay in the same place. So getting dropped is part of it. Blowing up is part of it. And I learned that this year with races. You have, for example, crits. Crits I tried for the first time this year. And I had crits that I just sat in, and I had crits that I went for a breakaway and I tried my best. So if you, let's say, are new to something and you're going out of your comfort zone and you know you're going to suck, what's going to be best for you? What would you want is at the end of the day, let's say that you're going to finish in the bottom 50% anyway. Wouldn't you rather finish in the bottom 50% having done something out of your comfort zone and living it all out there and going hard versus giving up and saying, no, I'm not going to follow that because it's too hard. So this is something that can even, not just in a race scenario, but I remember when I first started group rides, I remember thinking, you know what, I'm not going to, this is too hard. I'm not going to go for it because I'm going to feel like crap afterwards or I'm going to blow up. So yeah, everything has two sides, and I don't want to get too caught up in all the sides here. Of course, you want to get home. It's not like you want to be left to the side of the road and I can't even pedal anymore. You know your limits. It's within reason. But what's holding you back? So it's really just something for you to think about. Is it an ego thing? A lot of us master athletes, age group athletes, we are in a position in our lives that we achieved a couple of things in life, right? Perhaps we have a family, perhaps we have a stable job, a career, you have your degree, you got a master's, a PhD, whatever it is, and you're successful, let's say, from your perspective in your outside of the sport world. And then you put yourself in sport and you suck. So is it an ego thing maybe that you don't want to take risks? You want to play safe and you want to, I just want to go to those local races that I know I can win. I don't want to try this other one here that, I might just be at the bottom. And just an invitation to think about those things. And why not try something new and take risks?
Right.
Yeah. Right. Mhm. Yeah. Right. Exactly. That's the great point, Jason. You have those tools. You've been training with power. You know your numbers. You know you can hold 30 seconds at whatever, how many watts, right? So why not give that a shot out there? Yeah.
Yeah, so for those quickly in the live feed, it looks like I lost sound for just a moment. So what I was saying was that when you get to a group ride, to give yourself a chance, but do a calculated risk essentially. Whether it's a 1 minute, a 4 minute effort to close the gap, a 1 minute to get away from a break, not going for broke, but essentially just putting yourself in a calculated manner to make an effort out there, and not to just throw it all to the wind and just go as hard as you can till you blow up. Sorry about that. So.
One last comment I'll make here is about group rides in general and getting dropped. So there is value in getting dropped. You learn a couple of things about it. You learn about yourself. You learn about pacing. You learn about perhaps you're with the wrong group. Perhaps the group is too fast for your ability. So it is a learning opportunity. So getting dropped is not a bad thing. it is a bad thing if you're always getting dropped, because it might mean that you are riding with a group that perhaps is not for you. And so evaluate that as well. Women in co-ed rides sometimes to have a hard time because it is just different. And this is even physics, right? How men and women ride in terms of just flat sections, weight, that all plays a role as you're riding with a group. The accelerations, etc. Those can make a difference too. So if you are a female rider and try to it's good to do both, the women's rides but also the co-ed rides, but just keep that in mind. And then just know when you're giving up mentally, because if mentally you tell yourself, I'm not going to go for it, I'm not going to do this, or you just say this ride sucks, or I'm not really into it, all in, know that that's going to be your outcome. Once you give up mentally, then it's pretty much over.
Yeah, absolutely. So
those are really wise words. Yeah.
They
I
are.
think, doesn't Tony Robbins say that, we need a certain element of certainty in life and a certain element of change, and I think for a lot of athletes, when they're staying in the safe zone, right, that's when you start to see more obsession over the finer details, because they're just not going into the fear space to kind of create that, I don't know, is there an athlete soul in us that we need to keep feeding? It's really interesting. I came last in a race once, and it wasn't my fault, but I could never say that. The person I was with had back trouble, and I stuck with her the whole way. She got picked up by the ambulance, and I came home on this big event really far behind. They were coming out of, they had their cakes, their tea, and their biscuits, and they were cycling home, and I was coming to the finish, and they're like, well done, you did so well. And I was like, God, and I couldn't say it wasn't my fault. I just said to myself, someone always comes last, and most of us never do, and they're trying their best still, and it was really humbling, and I just smiled and I said, thanks. Leave some cake.
Yeah,
that's awesome. All right, so I know a couple of our coaches need to get out of here, and I want to respect their time, so I do want to slide on over to for our lab riders what we are covering this week. For strength, we are continuing covering our strength stretch cyclist, which is our post-workout workouts and stretching for core, and also our daily 15-minute workout. I know we had a lot of great skills. I got a chance to get back to riding some of those rides, and I actually did the roller coaster 2 days ago, and it was definitely very good. Tia could talk a little bit about our skills from this week.
So the roller coaster was designed to teach the rider to handle the ever-changing pace in a race over rolling terrain. So it's simulating the hard surges that come with approaching a small hill, standing efforts, etc. So it goes up and down, as you can imagine by the name of the workout. Then we had skills and torque 2, challenging you to change between high and low cadence very quickly. And the VO2 321, which was a VO2 designed to really drain you by the end of it. That was a challenging one for a lot of our riders. The Valleys 3 was the last workout of the week, which was work at, we've done Valleys 2, working a little bit above threshold and into low threshold for recovery and going up again. Great workout there.
Yeah. So just harnessing that ability to be able to recover, kind of not at a full recovery, but to be able to recover and come back and do those efforts again, essentially. And as we are able to put more and more efforts on top of each other, you're able to do that in a race. I think that could definitely be useful for us. We do have a lab rat of the week, Tia. Is that right?
Yes, Linda Brocado. She had a 64-mile race, and it was a race that came at a time, not the perfect time for Linda. She had some issues the week leading up to the event, and so she wasn't able to train the same way that you would if you didn't have the issues leading up to the event. So and she described the race as having some issues also at the beginning of the race itself. It didn't start very well. They were caught behind a group that could not get over some of the beginning obstacles. So this is mountain biking, and unfortunately it was single track, and so there was no way to go around them, and she lost about 5 to 10 minutes. but the outcome, was outstanding. She, even with all of those issues and hurdles, she was able to cut over an hour off her time from last year. So,
wow, well
yes,
done.
big shout out to Linda for that.
Yeah, so oftentimes we hear stories of how these kind of races go. I don't do much of off-road stuff, but I know as far as the athletes that I know and the stories that we hear, single track stuff and trying to get around people, it seems to be very impossible. So getting that whole shot and getting in front is key. But this is a great example of using the skills that you have and really putting in the efforts when you need, and still with getting lost, getting behind, she was still able to have a great result and get a better time than she did in the year past.
Yeah, and she mentioned that you have to be mentally sharp to be able to go through these.
Yeah.
And the way to do it, being stronger physically and in better shape, will allow you to keep your brain sharp and make those decisions during the race.
Absolutely. All right. So we've really great talk today. We had a little bit of an enlightening talk about chain line, and I should have asked Coach Ian as well as what his thoughts were. We talked about a little bit of age group cheating. I don't know if we opened the book too much on how to cheat, but at least bringing it into the light that there are riders both virtually and in real life doing those sort of things. Talked a little bit about with Coach Ian about getting injured, as well as the importance of taking risks, getting kicked and getting dropped from Taya there. Some really great conversation by the coaches today. I want to thank them for their time today and invite everybody out there to thank you again for joining us today. And if it's your first time listening, this is a new live format for a lot of us. This is the first time we've restreamed over several platforms. Definitely like and comment here. But if you'd like to hear more content from us, from the coaches from the Endurance Lab, head to your favorite podcast app and search the Endurance Lab, or head over to YouTube and do the same and click subscribe. For more information on when our next lab is and you want to join in, head over to endurancelab.fit, where you can learn and you can join us to train smart, learn more, and get results. We'll see everybody next week. Thank you.